Okay, welcome back. We are wrapping up our conversation on conformity and obedience. This is chapter 6. What we have already covered, what is conformity, and we have reviewed in depth the classic conformity and obedience studies. What we are going to cover in this part 2 of this video lecture: questions: what predicts conformity, why conform, who conforms, and the ultimate question: do we ever want to not conform and actually be different? Again, we ended with this. We're starting with it. Just a summary of the classic obedience studies, just to kind of keep it before you. Remember, Sharif was norm formation. It was the autokinetic effect, dark room, light, asking people how much light had moved. Light actually hadn't moved. Did it when people were alone. They gave a response and then had them come back and participate again for at least 2, I think for a total of 4 times, each other time with other people in the room. And what he found is by the last time that the answers all kind of came together around the same amount, the same length, even though there was actually no movement, but a norm was actually created. Ash conformity study. This was similar with visual perception. These were the lines. They had one line, and then they had 3 lines. They had to pick which one matched. Innocent participants were put in there with Confederates. The Confederates intentionally picked the line that was not the same. And what they found was that people were more likely to actually agree with the other person who gave the response. Most likely helping us to understand informational influences, because it was them needing not necessarily to be liked, which would be normative, because these were people who were strangers, and so liking wasn't a part of it, but not wanting to be wrong. So wanting to be right, they tended to change their responses to conform to the response that the others had given. And then Milgram, best one ever. Able to see the lengths that we would go to obey. We understand that obedience is tied to authority, and also distance. When we are not able to see the persons, connect with them, we're more likely to obey in things that go against our belief system. We're also more likely to obey when it's who we deem to be a true authority, when the institution they represent carries some social power. These are all conditions when we are likely to obey. Okay, so let's jump back in. What predicts conformity? Conformity, there are going to be certain situations that are just ripe for it. And overall, these 3 are the 3 major points that what we can use to guide when you're thinking about how and what predicts conformity. And basically, the more insecure we are about our judgments, the more influenced we are going to be by others. But you want to keep these 3 points in mind as we explore. First is group attributes. The first thing to keep in mind is size. Again, this may not come as a surprise to anyone, but conformity is higher when we are asked to respond publicly. You know that feeling that the pressure is on if you are called out about something publicly? Do you really want to admit what you really feel and be subject to the teasing of others? The other interesting thing that researchers found is that you can get someone to commit publicly to something in advance and come back and ask them about it, and they're more likely to uphold their original decision even in the face of challenges by others who do not agree. So what we're taking from this is that having somebody to say something out loud means that they are likely to hold their commitment. It also means having them say it out loud is that they may not actually be giving their true feelings, as the true feelings uh, are going to be questioned in light of the need to, so normative influence, that need to be liked and accepted. All right, so why conform? I've referenced normative and informational influences already, but now let's talk about what they mean in detail. So have you ever decided to do something, dress a particular way, go to a party, not because you wanted to, but because it was important to your social circle, and you really didn't want to risk being ostracized because of it? No way. Okay, me neither then. Anyway, in a nutshell, we have a need to be liked. That's just the bottom line. As we could talk about low self-esteem and insecurity all we want, but at the core of us as humans, we have this need to be liked, to be accepted, to be validated. And because of this, we conform. Simple as that. This is normative influence. This is the traditional, I'm going along with the crowd, so I am not rejected. In many instances, it could be something harmless, but there are some instances where we make some serious decisions based on what others are doing just to be accepted. On the other hand, we also conform when we are in situations by taking cues from others so we don't mess up. I remember as a child, I was taught how the table was set up, which forks go first, which glass, which hand you use to eat with what, blah, 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 blah. I have memories of this, right? However, I want you to know that every single time, or just about every single time I go to a formal dinner, particularly when I'm with like in work environment, professional dinner, I'm going to be the last one to eat and drink. Why? Because I need to make sure, I need the extra reassurance that I am grabbing the correct bread, the glass I'm drinking out of is not somebody else's, etc. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be wrong. I want them to think that I have couth, that I am knowledgeable about how to eat at a table. And so this is informational influences. We experience both in our social interactions, and friends are going to play a really strong role in both of these scenarios. All right, now who conforms? People who seek to please others and are comfortable following rules are most likely to conform. What does this mean? So I know this comes with a negative connotation sometimes, but there are people who we tend to think of as people pleasers. They are literally, we call some people conformists versus non-conformists, rule keepers. I know for most of my life, and pretty much still now, I tend to default to rule keeping. This makes life comfortable for me. I like that there are shoulds, that there are rules, that there's order. I'm less of a risk taker, so this works for me. Although as I have matured, I have learned to push back, and some of that has come from being educated, particularly in social psych and understanding all that I have learned now about human beings and what we do when we do and how we perform. I tend to like ask more questions now. But my default is still generally to I want everybody to be happy, just kind of go along. So I have more of the personality that's going to be more conformist. I don't need to risk, I don't need to rock the boat. I don't need to look different. I good just kind of blending in. Um, and so that's a personality thing. But beyond personality, culture also plays a role. And we are going to find, and I think it makes sense after we would have spent some time, that was in chapter 2, talking about collectivist versus independent cultures, that collectivist ones are going to be the one that focus more on unanimity and oneness. And so because of that, people are likely to conform in those circumstances. We want to look like each other. We want to be like each other. We want to, for this to be a sense of we're on the same page and we're all good. And then finally, and sometimes we hate to admit it, but sometimes we conform based on the rules we're in. For me, it's changing more and more now, but I am very laid back. Shorts, jeans, t-shirt, I'm comfortable. The roles I have now taken on, I have leadership positions in almost every role that I play, with the exception of when I teach in UB. But even as a professor in UB, there's still a particular role that I have to play. And so you will find that even though I may not necessarily put on the suit, neither the stockings or sometimes the heels, but I'm going to dress differently. And while that's a very, very superficial example of this, of conformity, it still is, because um, I could just choose to wear what I want to wear, but I know that, the university, the academy has certain standards, and I want to make sure that I'm, to some degree, upholding them, working within them. All right, so now we have spent all chapter, this one is shorter, talking about conformity. Interestingly enough, you may recall times when the last thing you wanted to do was conform or obey, and in fact, you may have done the total opposite. Well, if that's the case, then that's probably reactance. Um, Even while I'm saying that, I wonder if I was to put a rule that the house needs to be dirty, would that make my daughter want to clean it? Anyway, reactance is our way of protecting our sense of freedom. And this is especially true in Western cultures. We're going to act in ways that preserve our sense of individuality, asserting our uniqueness, although for the most of us, we want to be different. We want to have our freedoms, but we don't want to be too different. This is that ripe space of just different enough. All right, and that is all for chapter 6. This was a very, very short video. See you soon. The ideal size, if you want somebody to conform, is to put them in a group with 3 to 5 people. 3 people, 4 people is stronger than 3, 5 is stronger than 3, 6 isn't any stronger. So they find 5 to be that end point where anything else after that, it really doesn't matter how much more you add. As your text noted, a small group can have a very big effect. Groups yes, that word always throws me. Unanimity is also significant. What that means is that being in a group and all on the same page is stronger than even if just one person dissents. So observing one person's dissension, even if that dissension is wrong, can increase our own sense or our own need to be independent. Most times, we are happy to support a decision or position once others are on board. All right, so cohesiveness is that we feeling, and it's also very important when we look at what predicts conformity. So having connection with others in the group means that we are more likely to comply, acquiesce, or conform. Things like having people who look like us, sound like us, or having something in common. And this shouldn't come as a surprise given the world of Instagram and social influencers and the power that they quote unquote wield in social world. But the higher status has more influence, more impact. We just tend to defer to the person with the perceived higher status.